Traders, how are you? Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Overall this week, the overarching news story is the coronavirus, the virus that comes from China, that as of today, it has supposedly killed 56 people and over 2,000 are infected. I say supposedly because the numbers are probably a lot higher since China tends to kind of fudge those numbers over time. Other countries as well have found people, United States, France, others. And that caused a lot of fear into the markets as well. The other thing I wanted to mention, well, let me tell you this first. On Tuesday, we had the big sell-off due to the scare of the coronavirus. Wednesday, the U.S. market rebounded due to a strong forecast from IBM, which went up 3%. Help people, investors move back into the equity markets, which allowed for record highs in the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. Thursday, stocks were flat due to the now downward global pattern because of the fear from the coronavirus. And then on Friday, the market went higher in the morning and then later reversed from a strong forecast from chip maker Intel and more encouraging business activity from Europe. Overall for the week, the Dow was down 1.23%, the S&P 500 at negative 1.06%, and the NASDAQ was down 0.79%. The overseas market news, the MSCI All Country Index is up nearly 2.5% for the first 3 weeks of 2020. This is because we don't have let's call it an active trade war between the China and the United States, and also the fears of a recession now are starting to retreat. So that allowed a lot of the markets to increase, even though we had this kind of overarching ideal of the coronavirus. In Europe, the markets were mostly mixed. The biggest winner was Italy at 4.03%, and Latin America and Canada mostly lower. The biggest loser was the Merval in Argentina, 6.0% negative. Africa and the Middle Eastern markets mostly lower. South Africa, the biggest loser at 3.04%. And in the Far East, we had Hong Kong with mostly lower markets there, with the biggest loser being Hong Kong at negative 3.95%. Great news this week as well. I don't know if you guys know, if you guys are new listening to my channel, been following me for a while. Since I kind of started this project at DTA, at Day Trading Academy, where we teach people how to trade, my goal has always been to try to fund traders. I remember I did it, guys came over to me from United States and also other countries when I was living in Chile and in Colombia, London, India as well. And now we've made it public, where we call it Speed Up Trader, where you guys can come and apply to use our money. This was mostly for futures before, and now we have activated the Forex, the funding for Forex, which is great news for all of you guys. I still am against Forex for newer traders, but if you guys are already profitable or you're doing well and you want to be able to have more capital, come on over to Speed Up. Send us an email. Right now we're doing manual activations and getting all the final touches on, but super great news. Eventually we'll have cryptos, CFDs, and stocks. Finally, I'm thinking about maybe trying to do a fund for real estate as well, since we're getting into that as well. So just wanted to drop that on you. Back to the market news. Bitcoin is lower this week, 4.89%. It went down to 8,473.65 cents. No big news in Bitcoin this week. In financial and banking news, the Central Bank of Canada kept the overnight interest rate at 1.75%, as financial analysts predicted on Wednesday. And finally, people are starting to take money out of Switzerland. Private bankers are now saying that customers are withdrawing large amounts of cash due to the fact, you guys know that Switzerland is known as a financial haven where a lot of people with a lot of money put their money there to keep it safe and get obviously a return on their money. Now they're starting to take money out due to the fact that there's been 5 years now of negative interest rates. So if you guys don't know how that works, because some of you are new or aren't that abreast of how the financial markets work, normally we put our money in the bank. They give us, right now it's super low, they say 1%. Well, if you have $100 in your account, then at the end of the year you'll have $1 extra, right? Because it's 1% of 100. Well, in Europe right now and many other countries, they had a negative interest rate. So you literally had $100 in your account. At the end of the year, you might have had $99.70, whatever the percentage is. So people with a lot of money, we're talking about tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, that adds up to quite a lot of bit of money. So now the trend is starting to change because people are literally taking their money out because they don't want to lose it. They want to get a return on their investment. Now, the ECB, which is the European Central Bank, decided to hold rates steady at negative 0.5%. See, that's the major problem there in Europe. And they also pledged to continue purchases of about 20 billion euros or $22.2 billion a month in the financial markets. And they're using that, obviously, to try to prop the market up. And the developed countries, like the United States, Canada, most of Europe, Australia, Singapore, the majority of people's assets are in the stock market, right? So United States is definitely this case. Whereas in other developed, less developed countries, places like China or Colombia, for example, most of people's assets are in real estate. So in a lot of these countries, the US, for example, consumers are worth about 70% of the total economy. So think of it this way. If your pension rises or the money that you have, most of your assets rise as the stock market goes up, then you're going to feel more rich. You're going to go out and spend more money, and that helps to move the economy due to the fact that in the US, almost 70% is literally consumer behavior, consumer spending. So in this scenario, for example, in Europe, I don't know the exact percentage of the consumer spending as relation to the economy, even though it should be over 50%. If they purchase things in the financial markets, that will prop up the stock market, and then people will still feel like they have money and they'll go out and spend it to be able to help the economy move. Now, the only problem long term, and eventually we're going to get to this point probably in about 5 to 10 years, maybe a little bit less, is that someone has to pay for this debt. So the central banks can't just create money out of nowhere and then just start buying things. Eventually that money has to go somewhere. Someone has to pay that money because remember, federal governments borrow money as well. In Europe's case, most of their countries outside of Germany, which is the only country in the world that's lowering their federal load, all of the countries in Europe are up to their gigi in debt. So that's a problem because long term they can't continue to sustain this. And over time, every dollar of debt is not affecting the country as much because it's not as effective anymore. So that's kind of the cycle that we're in right now, and eventually the party is going to end, and eventually someone has to pay for all that debt, right? Just like in our personal lives, we can't go out and keep racking up more credit card debt and just expect for it to continue until, the end of time. So that's kind of the situation there. The ECB first introduced negative rates in 2014, even though they're holding them steady, and even though they had a lot of criticism for that, they're doing that to be able to boost inflation and economic activity, which, by the way, inflation for you and I is not a good thing. Inflation, if you guys don't know, is when the prices of things go up every year. So we don't want prices to go up every year because our salary doesn't go up that high every year, right? So keep that in mind as well. It's a rigged system. But anyway. So commodities, crude oil futures are down 7.66% in the U.S. International Brent is down 6.62%. It's a decline of 6%, which is the worst week in a year, and it's an 8-week low as well. Crude oil futures plunged on Wednesday over 2% as there was a disruption in Libya from the production that they had there for the oil, but they figured that due to the rising production of oil in the United States, which has become the largest producer of oil in the world, it's going to be able to go ahead and cover that disruption from Libya. Oil prices fell further on Thursday, down 1.5% in the U.S., 1.3% in Brent. Again, concerns of the coronavirus could affect the economy because, right now there's over 50 million people in China that are literally just quarantined. They're just shut down. And China is the second largest economy in the world. They produce a lot of products for a lot of people in the world, and that can actually start to spread in the global economy. Brazilian energy minister said Brazil is expanding its oil output rapidly, and they're also poised to have talks when joining OPEC, the oil mafia as I call them, when they visit Saudi Arabia in July. That's actually very, very big news because now, if I'm not mistaken, it's about just over 40% that they control in the oil market, so they can manipulate the prices, which affects everything because everybody uses oil for everything. And so adding more market share, more production into that group can obviously affect prices quite a bit. Now they're poised to sign a deal with India as well. Brazil, as one of the largest oil importers globally, which is India. If I'm not mistaken, they should be the third largest importer after China and the US. But don't quote me on that. Either way, they're still one of the largest importers. Palladium, which is one of the 4 precious metals, has become the most valuable as it tripled in 3 years. Shortage due to the fact that, we obviously have this environment in the world now with the environmentalists. They want to control the environment. And so governments have also been passing a lot of laws outside of the US. The US, even though Trump's position, this is actually something that's really interesting. Even though the U.S., Trump's position, the administration is against climate change because he says that, it doesn't exist, etc. That's what he says. I don't want you guys to go crazy on my comments here on YouTube. I'm just reporting. Remember, I'm just reporting to you the facts. I'm not giving you my opinion or getting political. So if you're for climate change or against it, if you're for Obama or against Trump or vice versa, doesn't matter. I just want to report to you the facts so you guys can understand these things, because I like to do these videos so you guys can understand how the overall economy works, and hopefully that can help you to make decisions, whether it's your retirement or investing, whatever you want. Educational purposes only. Remember that investing is risky, so you got to make the right decisions or try to do your best. So due to the fact that governments are moving in that direction as well, there's been a very high demand for metals like palladium, which go into the catalytic converters, which is that little square box, the rounded square box looking thing that goes under your car that controls the emissions, because the emissions for a lot of countries and cities have been getting more and more strict. So there's a lot of demand for this metal. The shortage of the metal is what's driving the prices up. Now it's way beyond the price of gold. It now sells at $2,600 an ounce and about $1,000 more than gold. Rhodium, which is another precious metal as well, has seen a rally, again, due to the demand, because they use that in emissions. Demand is expected to outstrip supply this year, and surging in demand, there's an uncertain situation or an uncertainty about where the supply is coming from. There's also been power outages in South African mines, which produce over 80% of the rhodium, of mined rhodium, which pushed up 55% the prices of rhodium in just 3 weeks at an 11-year high, near an all-time record of about $9,700 an ounce. Copper prices are steadied on Friday with the biggest weekly fall in near 19 months after 7 straight sessions of losses. Further worries at the spread of the coronavirus as well. And for the week, precious metals are higher. Gold is up 0.96%, silver is up 0.55%. In political news, legislators on the left Democratic side are accusing the President Trump in his impeachment trial of trying to do a corrupt scheme to pressure the Ukrainian government to help him get reelected in 2020. The Democrats are warning that if he is acquitted in the Senate, that America's global prestige is going to suffer if they do acquit him. Now, if you guys don't know how this works, House of Representatives, that's what I was looking for, not Republicans, House of Representatives. So we have Trump and the Senate on one side, and then we have the House of Representatives, which is the Democrats on the left side, right? So the House of Representatives are in charge of finding the information, witnesses, and everything, and then submitting it to the Senate. And the Senate is who actually charges them. Fortunately for Trump, they're on his side. So far, there's been down party lines. The Republicans are saying that there's no real facts, there's no proof that they're going to acquit him, and obviously the Democrats don't want him acquitted because they want to try to get him out of office. So that's basically what's going on there, if you guys aren't abreast of that. UK Prime Minister Johnson has finally pushed for a Brexit deal through Parliament. The Queen has signed it as well, which means that after 4 years of a stalemate, the UK will be leaving the European Union on the 31st of January. And also they're expected to have a deal in the coming days with the EU as well. The UK is now going to enter an 11-month transition period after the vote. In Peru, voters are heading to the polls on Sunday to choose a new Congress after a political scandal caused the closure of parliament. Nothing like corruption in these Latin American countries, huh? In economic news, the IMF is saying that global growth appears to be bottoming out and the outlook is uncertain. They lowered their forecast, which they're going to lower them again, so I'm not going to give you the percentages. In comparison, the global economy should expand about 2.9% And they're saying that the United States is going to grow at about 2% as well. There's other downgrades in countries like Chile and Mexico. Chile has been hit by massive social protests. And also in Mexico, they're only likely to grow about 1% in 2020, down from the forecast as well. In trade news, France and the U.S. have extended negotiations on a dispute over the new French digital tax that they wanted to place on a lot of these internet companies, which most are from the U.S. They wanted to charge the 3%. So now they reached a negotiation that's going to be until the end of 2020, as Trump did threaten to pose sanctions and tariffs and could potentially start a new trade war with not only France, but the EU as well. Trump spoke at Davos on Switzerland on Tuesday to tout the success of the country's economy. And whether you like Trump or hate Trump, obviously he's doing something right, because we're doing a lot better than other countries. And that's what he kind of pointed out in Davos. These guys at Davos are hypocrites. They talk about climate change, but they all arrive in their private jets, right? Trump he told a full auditorium with the recent trade deals in China and Mexico represents a model for the 21st century. And he's also yet to reach new trade agreements with the EU, India, and after Brexit, the UK. U.S. wants India as well to buy another $5 to $6 billion worth of American farm products if it wants to win a key U.S. trade concession and a wider pact. If you guys don't know, there's one of the things that I'm not going to get political, but one of the things that I thought was interesting was we had a NAFTA free trade agreement with people like Canada and Mexico, right? The North American Trade Agreement. That has now been replaced with the USMCA, the new agreement. But I thought it was very funny when I realized that Canada charged over 100% tariffs on our dairy. So if we wanted to send dairy or sell dairy to Canada, they were protecting their farmers by charging us an extra tax so people from Canada wouldn't buy from the U.S. And those are the kind of things that I guess Trump is trying to fix or remove, because in India as well, he wants them to buy more from the United States because there's a preferential system called the Generalized System of Preferences program, which allows for zero tariffs on up to $5.6 billion worth of exports to the U.S. So now he's going to India and he's saying, hey, you need to buy more stuff from us, or otherwise we're not going to let you have this preferential treatment. So that's kind of what's happening with India, so you guys know as well. In technology, with the end of the U.S. space shuttle program in 2011, NASA had to pay upwards of $86 million per seat to Russia to be able to send people to the International Space Station. SpaceX, which is run by Elon Musk, also Tesla before Solar City when they combined, they had their inaugural launch of the NASA astronauts that are going to be taking place at the Q2 of this year. And NASA is expected to pay SpaceX about $55 million per seat instead of the $86 million to Russia. Amazon wants to allow customers to connect their credit card information to their hands, creating retail checkout terminals that could work with this technology. I don't know if you guys read the Bible at all, but it says that is the mark of the beast. For those of you guys that are religious or haven't read the Bible, the Bible talks about those are the end times, etc. And they're applying for an application, which is a non-contact biometric identification system that includes a hand scanner. So, the chip here, and then you could just go like this to be able to pay for things. Google CEO support of the EU proposal for instating a temporary ban up to 5 years of facial recognition in public areas until privacy regulations are enacted. The Microsoft president argued for a methodical reform rather than just instituting as well, even though in London they are starting to put these facial recognition cameras all over the country. In investment news, U.S. home sales surged to their highest level in nearly 2 years in December. Latest indication that the lower interest rates are starting to help the mortgage rates, which are tied to the interest rates that are lower right now. After hitting a soft patch in 2018, it looks like the record low inventory is continuing. In international events, dengue fever in South America is on another outbreak as thousands of people in Paraguay are affected. The new president, which his name is Mario Abdo, 48-year-old, was struck by the disease after visiting the eastern part of the country. And Guatemala's new president, Alejandro Giammattei, Italian last name, on Friday declared a state of alert as the third gang-plagued municipality on the outskirts of Guatemala City as part of his new crime-fighting strategy. Sudan and major rebel groups signed a preliminary deal on political and security. paving a way for an eventual reconciliation going through ongoing talks as Sudan's ruling council and rebel groups restarted peace talks in October. And unusual facts this week, UN experts demand an investigation in the U.S. and in other global authorities after there were allegations that Saudi Arabia's crown prince was involved in a plot to try to hack Jeff Bezos' phone, the richest man in the world who runs and founded Amazon. The U.S. dairy industry is awaiting impact on Starbucks' decision to be able to try to convince people to choose dairy alternatives instead of dairy. It's a bid to further reduce its carbon footprint, says Starbucks. It may encourage other food service outlets as well. The milk consumption in the U.S. has dropped about 2% a year since 1970. Trump's admin is going to enforce a new restriction that's going to aim to what is called birth tourism by women. People who come into the U.S. on a U.S. tourist visa on intent of giving their babies citizenship. If you guys don't know, any person that comes to the United States and is born in the U.S. automatically gets U.S. citizenship. So he wants to try to curb that. Tourists are going to now need to prove medical necessity or other reasons for visiting the U.S. since this program has been rife with abuse. Main organizations that represents up to 300 indigenous tribes on Friday in Brazil plans to sue President Jair Bolsonaro for racism after he says that indigenous people were evolving to becoming more human. Probably shouldn't have said that in public, Sir President. Police in the UK are starting operational use of the live facial recognition cameras, even though there's a lot of criticism, as I mentioned to you guys a moment ago. And finally, last but not least, Walt Disney Co.'s Shanghai Disney Resort is deciding to close their facilities until further notice to help China stop the spread of the flu-like virus, which is called the coronavirus. It's going to cost them a pretty penny because this is the holiday season, one of the holiday seasons in China, the Chinese New Year, and it's going to hit them quite a bit. That's the news for this week, guys. Don't forget to leave all the questions with the hashtag AskMarcello. Don't forget as well to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next week.